super night, an amazing night together. And I said to Karen, she came in, I said, it's been like I know we didn't have her in 2020 because we got shut down the first part of the year. And then can't remember into 2019. It might have been early 2019 before the last time she was here. And so it's been way too long. We've missed you. We're so thankful that you are well and that you're here tonight to be able to impart in us about how we can be a little more optimistic as families. And I don't know about you guys, but I know that for ourselves as well, this is something to remaining positive and to be optimistic is a game changer, and how important that is, and how much the Lord desires that from us as well. So we want Karen to impart into us these good things. Karen, thank you so much for being here. 8 o'clock sharp. Yeah, so we got just about 45 minutes.
Perfect. So I was thinking you'd get tables and you're not, so we've got some handout parties to have. So
is the computer muted over there?
I
guess it wouldn't be the computer.
So go ahead and switch the PowerPoint to the full PowerPoint, not the free PowerPoint, so you can do that.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It would look the same.
What does that mean? Okay.
So let me know when you're ready to start that. So we're going to be talking about optimism tonight. Do you think this guy, do you think that quote is optimism or pessimism? What do you think about this quote? What do you think? Optimism or pessimism?
Oh, you have more. Okay, thank you.
Next slide. What about this one? That's optimism? How about this one?
Sorry.
What do you think about this one? Probably. And the next one?
Thank you.
The last one?
Very good.
I didn't.
Optimism or pessimism? What do you think?
You need a pen? Oh, thank you, Jason.
Kind of hard to tell with Eeyore. Sometimes he can be pretty optimistic, pretty pessimistic. Next slide.
Is this one? Can you turn that on?
Oh, is that yours?
Try that and then up the volume.
Next slide.
It's on.
Okay, so they're going to get the other PowerPoint going, and the other PowerPoint has a slide that says what we're doing tonight, which is finding how to be optimistic in our families. And my name is Karen Wood. I'm an LCSW with a practice in town. I'm a neurotherapist, so I teach people a little bit differently on what their brains do. And tonight we're going to study a little bit about the brain of optimism and pessimism. How many people have heard me speak before, so I know what we're doing here? Okay, so we'll do some review. And what do you think about yourself? Do you view yourself as optimistic or pessimistic? What would you say? A little bit of both? What else? Optimist?
Realist.
Okay, we're waiting for the slide after the introduction slide.
This one?
There.
Okay.
So this is my family of origin. I'm on the right. And this is my parents. My mother was a shining optimist until 8 o'clock at night, and then she was done with everything. My father was a little bit of mix of both. I would say more on the pessimistic side, and these are my different brothers and sisters from different parts of the country. Next slide. Should be my family now on the next slide. So there's Russell and I on the left.
Okay.
I am the sickening optimist, and he is the, you have to say it because I'm not allowed to say it. He is the, thank you. And here's my family now. That's Parker on the left. We adopted him from Korea when he was 1. My Eeyore, my almost daughter Jenny, and my grandbaby that she moved to Oregon, Low Growl. And that's my birth son Drew and his girlfriend. And the kids are kind of a nice mix of both. But the interesting question is on the left, how do we get someone who's so optimistic, and how do we get someone who is so, thank you, and that's what we're going to be looking at tonight, is how does that happen? And then how can we take that and move it to be a more optimistic family? Next slide. So when we look at optimist or pessimist, you kind of said for yourself, now look at your kids. What do you think about your kids? Birth babies and adopted babies and foster kids. What do you think about what their basic thinking structure is, optimistic or pessimist? Just take a second and think about that. Got a pessimist? Got a both? Good. Because what we're going to be doing tonight is viewing pessimism as a trauma response. Next slide. So what we're going to be doing tonight is exploring this idea of optimism versus pessimism. We're going to be looking at trauma and its impact on the future, which really is what so much of pessimism is. Then we're going to be talking about how we can get ready to do the future better. And then we're going to be talking about how to use our physical selves more to get to more optimism. And then we're going to be talking this idea of clear thinking, which some of you are used to knowing. That's what I tend to talk about, is how do we get our brain and our body and our behavior and our belief all into sync with each other. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. It's really interactive. If you have any questions, ask at any time. I may be asking you to model some things and ignore the bottom right. That was a quote that didn't get taken off this afternoon because I got 2 trauma calls this afternoon trying to finish this. So that's a trauma burp right there. Just ignore it. Okay, next slide. So what is an optimist? It's an interesting thing to look at for just a second. It's from the Latin, which is viewing things for the best. Optimum is where it comes from. So it's a mental attitude characterized by hope and confidence. And the main difference is it's the ability to look at the future. And what gets destroyed in the brain of trauma is that ability to look at the future. We have a really popular diagnosis now called borderline personality disorder, and that's one of the major characteristics of it is they can't view the future at all. So they make really poor decisions in the now. So what we're going to be looking at neurologically is that it really is a scanning thing. So go ahead and get your brain out. Let's start really talking brain here for a minute. I'm going to do a real fast review for some of you that are somewhat new. Some of this will look familiar. If this drawing is looking familiar to you, then you should be able to kind of tell me about it or fill it in and tell somebody else about it. So if you've been here a few times, this is like kind of your quiz time. So who can tell me where your amygdalas are? Quiz time. Where are those amygdalas? Nice. They're deep in the middle of your brain. So there's these 2 little orbs right here. It's Greek for the word almond. So go ahead and draw those in. So your amygdalas do alert in your brain. So if you think of that as your alert center, this is also where all your F's come from, the ones we can write in church. So go ahead and write fight, fright, and freeze there. There's a new F that's really come out since the last time I spoke here, and that's fawn. It's an advanced form of freeze. So as we get talking tonight, if you find you or others are in a sense of paralysis about a lot of things, you might want to research the idea of fawn. It's an advanced form of freeze, so be curious about that. So basically, this amygdala of ours protects us from rattlesnakes. It alerts us when something's going wrong, and it gets us into action. But when we have pessimistic people, it learns how to get them into the wrong thinking all the time. And optimistic people somehow get to be optimistic all the time. And that's all based on next door, right next door. Just draw a whole bunch of M's here for the word memory replay. And that's that hippocampus. If you think of hippo like big and campus like school, this is the big school of memory replay. And this is the 2 of the areas that we're really going to think about when we want to create more of an optimistic family. how can we help our whole family system learn to do alert better? And go ahead and draw a scale of like 0 to 10 on the bottom of your paper, because optimists tend to operate on this plus side, and pessimists tend to operate on this negative side. You can really tell when you're driving. Who among you can tell you're on the negative side when you're driving and you go to pretty big numbers automatically? Any confessions in the crowd? Who can go to some pretty negative reactive numbers when you're driving pretty quickly? Yes, ma'am, in the back. What number do you go to, would you say, automatically? 7, it's pretty high. Anybody else brave enough to say what number they go to? It's a real good way to test what your automatic system is doing, right? In my precious husband's mind, anybody who drives a certain speed is a moron, which don't quite understand that, but that's the habit that comes out. So optimism and pessimism are often brain habits, and that's what we're going to study, and that's what we can heal. So if you want to learn more about it, you can look at Rewire Your Brain by Jordan Arden. It's a real basic brain book if you want to learn more about basic brain structure. So go ahead to the next slide. So what we're looking at tonight is a series of quotes by a guy named Bessel van der Kolk. Has anybody read his book, The Body Keeps the Score? Yay. It's on the national best time seller list for months on end now, because he really clearly speaks to what trauma does to the brain and body. So I put a series of quotes in for us. So this is one of the best ones, I think, to understand how the pessimistic brain got to be that way. The human brain is a social organ that is shaped by experience, and is shaped in order to respond by the experience that you're going to be having. So particularly earlier in life, if you're in a constant state of terror, your brain is changed to brain alert for danger and to try to make that horrible feeling go away. There's our scanning idea. So if you yourself or children that you're raising have been in a constant state of danger, that amygdala can actually get swollen in size and structure, where it will only scan for danger and everything becomes danger. So when you say, how was your day at school, and you get this negative diatribe about school, and you think, come on, you can't be that negative. That amygdala probably was having to work really hard all day, and that little scanner, if you think about the thumb tips and the fingertip as the amygdala, and that those fingers are the hippocampus, it's had to be on real high alert all day for what's going to be these negative things. And it just might not make sense to you, but I think it's really important to understand it's a brain thing, this negativity. It's so many memories that have been dangerous. And we adopted our son Parker from Korea, and I wish I had known this, because I took a lot of his behaviors as personal affront to my excellent parenting, when actually he was just anxious and fearful about a lot of things, and I just missed that completely for quite a few years till I started reading my first brain articles. So for those of you who are new and have seen this for the first time, the thing to know is the brain takes us back to where we were the last time and starts us from there. It's called the set point of reactivity. That's what that driving example's about. So who has an example of a little being in their house that their habit is to go back to that last number and start from there in a certain negative behavior? Cleaning the bedroom's a really good example. Which one of you have the little drama king or queen when it's time to clean a bedroom? There you go. And what number would you say that little brain automatically takes them to? The top, yeah. And we're like, it's going to take you 17 minutes. And but that little habit brain, and I'll help you on an exercise pretty soon, know how to help them use their pictures to get past that, because we tend to jump in with our parental words, which we know how that goes. So good. That's a good example. Boy, you sure tasted it this year with the whole COVID thing and trying to keep them motivated online, right? You could see a lot of new habits being formed that weren't helpful at all. So just to review, that amygdala is the thing in the brain that's doing all those F's. And if we could understand optimism and pessimism from a viewpoint of fight, fright, and freeze, then we might be willing to slow down and understand it a little bit more, what's going on at the moment when we're getting that big reactivity or that big negative reaction. So for those of you who have seen this map a few times, what is a good reminder for you? Anything helpful in there as a reminder? Brain habits. They're habits. It's not necessarily a disrespect flag. It's probably just a brain habit. And how can we get them around that? Go ahead. We're going to talk about how to move from pessimism to optimism. We'll talk about that brain habit a little bit more. So keep learning more about the brain. It really is the answer to so many of these behaviors. Next slide. So now we talk about, okay, so what happens in the brain then when we have someone who's been raised in trauma? So normally what happens is the amygdala sends a message, hey, how do we do this? And the brain runs up and grabs a memory and says, oh, it worked pretty good last time. And it runs up to where we do our thinking and our planning, our frontal lobe, thinking and planning. And it says, okay, we got this. It only takes 16 minutes to clean the bedroom. We can do this, no problem. That's often how the brain works. Goes from the inside to the top, solves the problem, makes the plan. In trauma, what happens, you can see that there's no going up the step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They go 1, 2, 3. The middle is broken. That's what that big X is. And they just go up to this high reactivity business, whether it's in a physical response or a real negative response. And the way to understand that is, here's the middle brain saying, uh-oh, can we do this? It tries to come up here. So start from the middle, draw a line like 3/4 the way up, and then turn right around and go higher up that scale. So here's my reaction. My brain tries to go up here to figure out what to do, and it doesn't even get that far. It just goes to a higher reaction. So that's what trauma does for a brain. It actually changes a lot of the middle functions, explain that another time, where they actually don't work. The blood vessels don't flow there, the neurons don't flow there, and this reactive chain gets started. That's what the big red X is at the top. It's as if clear thinking is not available. So if thinking about the future and being positive and optimistic is an upper brain function, which it is, because you have to be able to view all the dangers and what you're going to do with your future, and I can't access that, well, then I'm going to stay in this swirly-durly of negative reactions. And this can often even be seen on a scanner. So I looked at a brain scan of a client. I sent him to have his brain scanned, and his brain scan showed there was almost no activity up here. His brain was just not even hardly functioning because his depression was so severe. So we know then our job is to help him get more blood flow up to his frontal lobe. So look at yourself if you're a pessimist, or if you have someone that you love that's having a lot of reactivity or a lot of pessimism. Does that drawing kind of make sense, that there's kind of no middle thinking about things or reacting? We just kind of go to the big extreme of the negativity or of the reaction. Does that kind of help make anybody in your life a little clearer, whether it's yourself or somebody you love? That it's a brain thing. And I think we keep studying this and understand that, and that it's a tissue thing, and that tissues can heal. Then we can have more hope that we can have more optimistic family structures if we can all work together to heal this thing. So the trick here is to do ourselves first, because if we react ourselves at an 8, 9, or 10, then it's not going to be so helpful in the moment.
And that gets really tricky if you tend to have a more pessimistic nature, not to get negative yourself at the moment, to react to that negativity. We're going to talk a lot about how to pull the body in at that moment, how to stand up straight, take a better diaphragmatic breath, to try to keep yourself not rocketing to the top of that. So think of your kids. Who in your household does that give you a much clearer understanding of? Any examples here you want to share? Anybody have any little rockets living in your house that go to the top? Go ahead. I do. I have the 6-year-old from 0 to 10, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's over. Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about what to do with that because that's a brain thing. And just remember from previous talk that once we get to that 8, 9, 10 on the scale, we're hijacked. Nobody is home. Remember the Daniel Siegel drawing of the stairs from the middle of the brain to the top? And there's a baby gate locked down there, and they are locked in that emotion. And they literally can't get themselves out of it. That's why these extended timeouts are just not the best thing to do sometime, because that little pumpkin can't. See, and I didn't realize that with my youngest. I'd put him in his room, close the door, and he would destroy his room and then get in all kinds of trouble. And I've apologized to him greatly because I didn't realize then he couldn't have any control of that little brain at that moment. And I had done exactly the wrong thing, insisting that he go moderate that by himself. So the much better thing to do is when that little brain's locked, or when someone's in a pessimistic spot, there's no good conversation's going to happen, so don't try. And then somehow distract it. Get it just completely, just get him out of there, get him doing something else, change the topic. As an adult, some of the best advice in dealing with someone who's really pessimistic is just take a bathroom break. It's why God made the bathroom. Just say, I'll be right back, because no good is going to come if someone's hijacked. Good visual picture is the word hijack is from the French word hijaire. In the French Revolution, when you would be in your carriage going through the dark forest and you'd get pulled out of your carriage, that was the moment you were hijacked. And I think it's really a good brain picture to just kind of picture they've been pulled out of their frontal lobe. Any Inside Out fans in here? Love that movie, yes. Remember when joy and sadness are fighting and they get sucked out of the frontal lobe off into the memory zone? Remember, that's exactly what that was. They didn't have any ability to think together at that moment, and then they got sucked. If you haven't seen that movie for a while, watch it again with the brain in mind. It's really well done. The only thing wrong with that movie is they never had Joy do good breathing. If Joy could have just stopped and taken a good exhale, the nation would be breathing better, but they missed that clue. So just remember, we're talking about pessimism being from trauma, and the scanner is broken. It can only view things from a negative viewpoint because the ability to see the bigger picture, and there aren't memories of positive things to grab. Because remember, in trauma, that hippocampus, where we replay the memories, the cells actually change shape. And in a lot of traumas, new good memories can't even be retained. So when we're trying to take care of kids and they've been from such trauma and we think they should be remembering this, we think they should be getting it, it's just remember that those new memories are not actually being consolidated in those brain tissues yet, because there's just no room for them at that point. So optimism and pessimism is a brain thing. And the memory structure is often what makes the difference between optimism and pessimism. I have so many wonderful memories of playing with my mom. Just so many, I couldn't even count them, right? That's my memory structure. And then the next person has very, very terrible memories of being with their mom. And that makes the brain structure different. So keep that in mind, too, maritally, if you're married to an Eeyore, to just remember to have great grace that it's a brain thing, and keep doing your best work to remain on the right side of the line. But if you can understand it's a neuro thing, then you can find much more grace. So any questions about that idea that the traumatic brain can only scan for danger? Any more questions about that? Go ahead. Well, there's definitely both. We know that. We know that we're now studying epigenetics with the generational train of trauma and that telenome that actually attaches to the DNA and transfers that. So there definitely could be that. It could be just a predisposition to that. Can we heal from that? Absolutely, and we'll get to some of that here. Because if we can change the brain scanner from that negative scanning for danger, danger, no safety, danger, warning, to just switching it to where there can be a viewing of where my next safety is coming from and where my next security is coming from, then that brain learns to change itself. That can take a long time, but it definitely is something that can heal. And that's what these meetings are about, which I think they're so great, is because the more we can learn how to do that with someone and for someone, the chances of them healing are better. Good question. Okay, any other questions about this idea that this scanning is from the neurology of trauma? Any more questions about that? Oh, absolutely. That's really a controversial thing, but I just have no doubt. The way I know is when there's large family structures and I look at the personality changes of the kids, I often ask, what was going on with your mama when you were, I'm one of 7, so we have a lot of good examples in our house. We're half bio and half adopted, so something that applies. But it definitely is something to be looked at, is that in utero. What we know is kids that have been exposed to drugs have 70% chance of having ADHD, attention and focus issues. So that tells us right there, that's a neuro thing, right? When we have drug babies who come out and can't be touched, we can tell already that that little brain is rewired. That's something that they're just really starting to study more. And it's still incredibly amazing to me, the adoption stories where you don't really know what the birth story was for those first 9 months, when I think it has so much to do with that baby. Good question. Anything else about trauma and scanning? Yes, please do. Mm-hmm. Taking flight, yes. Bring back the owl. No, it's a great picture. They are. The other thing, a good thing about the tiger and the owl is you can kind of feel the physical difference, which next slide, we're going to really start talking about why this idea of understanding the physicality of this trauma is so important. So next slide. I think the owl has left the control room. So now we're going to how do we heal to optimism. And this is another quote by Bessel I think is really helpful for what we're about to start doing. Trauma victims cannot recover until they become familiar with and befriend the sensations in their body, like when is the tiger trying to take over? When is the owl leaving me? Being frightened means you live in a body that is always on guard. Angry people live in angry bodies. The bodies of child abuse victims are tense and defensive until they find a way to relax and feel safe. In order to change, people need to become aware of their sensations and the way that their bodies interact with the world around them. Physical self-awareness is the first step in releasing the tyranny of the past, which might surprise you in talking about how to heal pessimism and move to optimism is to be more aware of your body, which is exactly what you were doing for everybody looking for the shoes, because we can kind of, all of us could see the pictures of what everybody was frantically doing. So go ahead to the next slide and grab your box worksheet. This looks familiar to some of you, but I think now you're going to be able to realize that there's something going on here that you may not have noticed before. So we do these 4 steps, and notice now with a little more clarity maybe the first and fourth step, or notice your tension. So for those of you who have done this before, how is that helpful after reading that quote about being more in touch with our bodies? How is it helpful to have a thinking thing you can do to help you be more aware of your body in the situation? So anybody that, go ahead. Pull your 5 sensations in, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we do the boxes is to break apart our tensions and then notice for each tension we're having, what is our body doing with each different tension, because it's going to be different. So when I'm in a marital situation, notice the tension. I can tell when I'm tipping from that 7 to an 8 because I lean forward and my eyebrows go up. And that's when I know I need to sit down and get those eyebrows down. So that's really good. So you've noticed more about your body. Anybody else who's done this a little bit? Is it a little more interesting why we pay more attention to the body of our thinking? Yes? You'll notice you stop breathing. Absolutely. That's one of the really fundamental ones. If we could notice that more. And that might be one of the things, if we've got our little boo who's at a 10, if we can just help him catch their breathing for a minute. Has anybody seen that viral YouTube of that little guy helping his littler brother breathe? Little brother's really upset and he's just sobbing, and the little 6-year-old saying, "Now let's breathe," and he's doing it with him. And you see the little guy's shoulders calm down. It's really precious, but I thought that somebody's getting good training in that household, helping that guy go down. So these 4 steps, we don't have really a lot of time to go over in depth, so what we do is let's pick somebody who has a tension in the household they're currently dealing with that wants to play with the 4 steps. Yes, ma'am. Yes? Something going on in your household that's driving you crazy. So we got a cleanup box, right? And when you notice that, where do you notice the tension? In your neck. Good. So you just write neck there. Step number 2, what's the outcome of the picture? Notice we're just going to do pictures. Pictures are so much faster than words. So the more you can think in pictures, even as a pessimist or working with a pessimist, your brain will be more available up here. And so, what do you look like continuing to have a tense neck dealing with this? Mm-hmm. There you go. And what number of reactivity would you say you're at the moment? No, thinking about it. When you're going to go look for her, what number are you at? Yeah, probably about 8. That's what we're talking about. That's the big uh-oh. Now, step number 2 on the bottom right is this concept of acceptance. It doesn't mean the thing is right or good. We're not making a judgment about what it, but if you could have your best brain and if you could stand up straight and take your good exhale, then what would you look like looking for in the house?
It might not be a smile, but it would be the absence of tension.
Nice. More neutral. Good. And step number 4, we're going back to the body here again. What's your neck doing then? So you're looking for your daughter. You're a little more neutral. What is your neck doing?
It might actually be moving
It,
instead of just
absolutely. And what's your breathing doing? Nice. So what we've done is we've gone from a state of tension, and we're looking for her. We're in a state of tension. Step number 3, if I could view the situation with more clarity, more frontal lobe, if I could invite that owl into the cleaning, then this is how I know it's working, is this change in tension. The trick with dealing with pessimism or people from high trauma is that doesn't usually solve the problem, right? So she comes back in the room and she's got a whole nother problem she's presenting. Then you just start over again. You're such a mean mother. And then what number does your tension go back up to? Because she knows which buttons to push. 9.75? Yeah, how did I know that one? Yep. What's the outcome of the picture if you're 9.75? More disaster. Then you do number 3 again. What's the outcome of the picture with acceptance of you being in your best state of mind? See, you're inviting your scanner to figure out what could I look like. Really great thing for number 3 is to notice that sometimes it can be a pretend picture. Even if you don't think you can do it, what would I look like if I could do it? Then that scanner switches to the options. Nice. So you get yourself back down to a 4 or even a 3, and you're doing great. And then who else in your house is going to be the problem? Who would be next? Trevor. And what would Trevor be doing that would send you back up to that 8.5?
clobbering his sister.
That's it, the clobber box. There it is. Now let's just go right down on number 3 for time's sake. What's the outcome of the picture with acceptance? What could you look like handling Miss Bedroom and Mr. Clobber in your best state of mind? Can you see what you could look like?
I might be physically in between them, trying to project
Peace and calm with the stronger voice and get that exhale going. And then think of them both as brains. How do I get both of these brains unupset, right? This is a really great exercise to do with kids when they're really, really upset, because often they're upset about more things than we know about, especially now with COVID and going back to school. And little 9-year-old today, they all got in trouble and had to write 45 times, "We will be nice and not write mean notes," because there was this whole series of mean notes going around the classroom. The second day, they're back for the whole day. So a lot of our kids have a lot of new issues to deal with. So the worksheet just helps us say, hey, how can we break this down? And it helps us view what could I do with my best state of mind. It really helps me in dealing with my Eeyore to notice my own tension first. Remember, catch the physical first. When my eyebrows are up and I'm leaning forward. Because the more we can say to that amygdala, hey, amygdala, I hear you. He's being really pessimistic right now. But hey, amygdala, I don't need any extra F chemicals. I got this. Then it will release you of those F chemicals. The F chemicals are all just trying to protect everybody. That's their job. And they're just trying to protect us from rattlesnakes. But we all live with too many rattlesnakes. And so the idea behind how do we get to be a more optimistic family is to understand each other's brain set and then understand how we can use maybe these 4 steps and using pictures to see what I would look like if I could be the only optimistic one in the whole household. I don't know what happens in our family, but when we go to put the boat out, every male creature on the planet goes into a negative state of weirdness. I'm not sure what that's about. Backing up, undoing boat launch, I don't know, is there, I don't know. But I have to work really hard to stay optimistic and not flight and take the van and leave them with the boat and have my nice quiet day at home. The thought has occurred to me many, many times. This is one of the ways we can help heal the pessimism of the past. If there's a past thing, doing these 3 steps with the past thing. Remember, Bessel van der Kolk says we've got to get this brain and body in coordination with each other. So just be really curious. Next slide. The 2 most important phrases in therapy, as in yoga, are notice that and what happens next. What did you notice in this thinking thing? Notice that. It's our first step, right? And what's going to happen next is the second and third steps. I mean, when I read this quote, I was like, da-da-da-da-da, we're already doing it, yippee skippy. Once you start approaching your body with curiosity rather than fear, everything shifts. So you can add different questions to your people of trauma that you deal with. And one of the great ones is, what would we look like right now if we all had our best brains? What would we look like? And then you just walk away and let their little brains stir on that a little bit. That's the good idea with time out sometime. Here, you just sit here for 2 minutes, and when you want to tell me what your best brain would look like, sometimes that's really, really effective. Other times, it's a disaster. You just have to see. So this process of saying, hey, notice your body and listen to your body, honor it. It's trying to protect you. And then this idea of, oh, wait, what would I look like if I could listen to that? Then what could come next? Next slide. There it is. So the next slide was just having you look at this from that perspective of that we're doing the right thing when we do this. Thank you for getting that back. See, we're noticing what the body's doing, and we're looking at the picture of what we could look like. So this is just excellent trauma material. I didn't know that when I fell in love with this, but now I'm researching trauma more. I'm more committed to it than ever. Next slide. Being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. So read that to yourself a second before we go to our last slide. So this optimism, pessimism thing is about feeling safety. So go ahead to the next slide. So take a second. You might flip your paper over and think of everybody in your household. Maybe scribble everybody's name in your household. What's an area, the way we run our house, where people don't feel safe? It's not about if you think they should or not. It's if the kid or adult feels safe or not. So think about your family. Think about the little beings. Who's not feeling safe? And then ask yourself, after you do that, you might write this down and spend more time with it later, but how can I be part of their safety? This has really helped me maritally. Wait, how can I still be part of this safety? Right now we're remodeling, and I'm used to living in big messes. I'm one of 8 kids. But how can I help him feel safer in this remodel is the thing I'm working on now. So how is that kind of interesting as we end here to think about this pessimism and having an optimistic family is really about creating more safety? How is that helpful? Anything in there helpful for you? And they can count on what to expect. That's really part of the whole attachment theory, is that if we can meet all these needs consistently, right? So, any other comments about safety? If you feel safe, you can develop and grow, absolutely. And what did you learn tonight about what the brain parts might be impacted if we can create more safety? How are you a little bit more curious about this being a brain part thing? Anything in there? Can you kind of see if I can create safety? That amygdala doesn't have to work so hard scanning all the time. What mood's mom going to be in? What mood's mom going to... Dad's coming home. can you see how creating safety can actually start healing some of those old memories? Now, in some of our babies that are from high trauma, that's not going to happen in 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, because they're all behind on those brain vessel developments. I just love that sound. I'm just sitting here grinning like an idiot because she's so adorable. And what was helpful to just take a minute and think about each of your own family members. Anything there that was kind of helpful for you to peek at? Any new insights tonight on how you might approach something a little differently at home? I did take behavioral as a personal affront. And they should know they're being mean right now, yes. We could do a whole great session sometime on memories and what we expect of children, but actually how many times they have to hear things before it actually is a part of them. It would be startling to know how many times they have to repeat it. Remember, how many times did you read Good Night Moon? That's because every time they were picking up something different from it, right? They just have to hear it over and over again. But if I can notice my tension, and what's the outcome of the picture if I stay in a state of tension? So put this on your fridge and just watch things. And then be in touch if you want more help, if some of these things from your childhood are messing with you. If you want to learn more about trauma and the brain, be in touch. We've got some trauma trainings at the office that I think you might find helpful. So tonight we looked at how to have an optimistic family by realizing that pessimism is a part of all of us and all of our kids and this nation after COVID, and that we can realize it's a brain thing and use our own body and brains to discover more optimism for ourselves. Thank you.
I'm curious, how much more did you have left for tonight? Did you get through it all?
We could have done a whole bunch more box stuff, but it worked.
Okay, all right. Because as I say, we'll have to get you back for more if you felt we're rushed because we started a little bit late. So, thank you so much. Thank you. So, can you stay for a little bit too? Okay. So Karen will be here. So let's. I'll close this up in prayer, and then let's go rescue our workers and grab our kiddos. And if anybody wants to stick around and hang out with Karen, I'll stay as long as Karen will stay. How about that deal? Okay.